Welcome to a list of mountains so difficult, and in some cases nearly impossible to reach, that many of them have barely been seen up close, let alone climbed. Every peak here is unique, either because of extreme remoteness, brutal terrain, or the sheer difficulty of even getting near them. This entire list was compiled through deep satellite investigation and research into some of the most inaccessible places ever recorded. Mountain number 2 is so deep in the Congolese rainforest that it's been linked for over a century to rumors of living dinosaurs, a creature locals call Mokele Mbembe. Mountain number 7 has cliffs so sheer and untouched that scientists discovered entirely new species just meters from its summit. Mountain number 9 was only climbed once, despite being the highest point in all Australian territory. And the final mountain on this list may still be hiding a Cold War nuclear device somewhere on its slopes, in a place considered the sacred home of a Himalayan goddess. But let's start with the first one, a mountain stranded in the South Atlantic Ocean, where fewer people have stood than walked on the moon. This is mountain number 1. Olavtoppen rises just 780 meters or 2,560 feet above sea level, which doesn't sound like much until you realize where it is. This is the tallest point on Bouvet Island, a glacier-covered volcanic rock in the South Atlantic Ocean, considered the most remote island on Earth. There are no airports, no harbors, and no permanent landing sites. The entire island is encased in sheer cliffs and ice fields, sitting 1,700 kilometers from Antarctica, and over 2,200 kilometers from the nearest mainland. In other words, Olavtoppen is a mountain in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by violent seas and zero infrastructure. Bouvet is a Norwegian territory, designated a protected nature reserve since 1971. The only way to reach it is by military vessel or ice-rated research ship, and even then, landings are only possible by helicopter during brief weather windows that may last just minutes. Despite being discovered in the 18th century, no one summited Olavtoppen until 2012. A small Norwegian team landed on a narrow coastal ledge called Nyrosa, then climbed through unstable volcanic slopes and crevassed glacier to reach the summit. As far as we know, no one has been back since. But the strangest part of this island's story, in 1964, a British expedition spotted an abandoned lifeboat on the island's shore. There were no markings, no people, no wreckage nearby, and no explanation. When a follow-up team arrived 2 years later, the boat was gone. To this day, no one knows who left it, or how they got there. A ghost vessel, a mountain barely anyone's seen, and a frozen island in the middle of the ocean. It's hard to find a place more remote, or more unreachable, anywhere on Earth. From an island buried in sea ice, we move to the heart of Africa, into a region that barely shows up in satellite imagery at all. The rainforest here is so dense and so unexplored that local legends still speak of creatures never documented by science, including one said to resemble a living dinosaur. This is mountain number 2. At 1,460 meters, or 4,790 feet, this mountain doesn't break altitude records, but its location makes it one of the most inaccessible and least documented peaks in all of Central Africa. Mount Tshibinda sits inside the Congo's Albertine Rift, just south of Lake Kivu, in a volcanic region scattered with dozens of extinct cinder cones and forested ridgelines. The surrounding terrain is steep, heavily vegetated, and virtually unmapped. And despite being just 20 kilometers from a major city, there are no climbing records, no photos from the summit, and no marked trails leading to the top. Satellite imagery shows a tree-covered volcanic slope rising out of dense rainforest, but there are no obvious signs of past ascents or active research in the area. The last eruption in this field likely occurred thousands of years ago, and the cones have since been reclaimed by vegetation. But the real mystery comes from what surrounds it. This stretch of the Congo has been at the center of unexplained sightings for over a century. In the early 1900s, European missionaries recorded stories of a large, long-necked animal said to live in the swamps, known to locals as Mokele Mbembe. The descriptions sound eerily similar to a sauropod dinosaur, and while no proof has ever been found, the fact remains. The interior of this rainforest is still almost completely uncharted. No expeditions have ever targeted Mount Tshibinda, no routes have ever been documented, and due to years of conflict and political instability, almost no one, local or foreign, ventures into the area today. It's a mountain located in one of the least researched regions on the planet. and we genuinely don't know what might be happening near its slopes. From the rainforest of the Congo, we head north, to a place even fewer people have set foot. This mountain rises from the sea, near the edge of the Arctic Circle. It's surrounded by fog, cliffs, and constant ice. And although it's active, there is almost no one to witness it if it erupts. This is mountain number 3. Beerenberg stands 2,277 meters tall. That's 7,470 feet, and it's the only active volcano in the Arctic. It sits on Jan Mayen, a narrow Norwegian island between Greenland and mainland Europe, almost entirely cut off from the rest of the world. There's no port, no regular access, and no civilians. The only people allowed on the island are a small rotation of military and weather personnel, and even they rarely go near the mountain. The volcano itself is glaciated from top to bottom. More than 20 glaciers flow down its slopes, some of them directly into the ocean. Climbers who've attempted it describe crossing heavily crevassed ice fields, climbing steep volcanic rock, and doing all of it in near-constant fog, where orientation is nearly impossible without GPS. Its summit crater is still active. You can see steam venting out from the rim, even in satellite imagery, and the weather can shift within minutes, with storms coming off the ocean that wipe out visibility and turn glacier routes into ice traps. Only a handful of documented ascents have ever taken place, usually by researchers during rare summer windows. And even then, they rely on supply boats that only visit the island a few times per year. There are taller mountains, but very few that sit this far from help in conditions this unstable, with so few recorded climbs. That's why Beerenberg is on this list. From a volcanic glacier in the Arctic, we head straight into the jungle. This next mountain is the tallest in an entire country, but it's almost never seen. It's buried in thick rainforest, surrounded by military restrictions, and hidden so well by clouds that early surveyors didn't even know where the summit was. This is mountain number 4. Pico da Neblina is 2,995 meters, or 9,826 feet high, making it the highest mountain in Brazil. But most Brazilians have never seen it. Its name means Peak of the Mists, and that's exactly what hides it. Constant cloud cover, deep jungle, and the fact that it sits right on the Venezuelan border, inside a protected indigenous territory. For decades, there wasn't even agreement on where the true summit was. Some maps placed it in Venezuela, others in Brazil. The first confirmed ascent didn't happen until 1965, when a Brazilian army team cut their way through the rainforest, climbed through mud and heat for weeks, and eventually found the highest point using basic instruments and aerial photos. Today, reaching it still takes at least 10 days of jungle trekking, and that's with government permission. The trail passes through Yanomami land, one of the largest indigenous territories in South America, and the area is off limits to outsiders without an official guide and federal authorization. But it's what's on top that makes this mountain different. The summit is capped by ancient quartzite rock. It's often shrouded in clouds and supports isolated patches of stunted forest and moss-covered stone. Survey teams have documented rare orchids, high-elevation ferns, and several amphibian species that are found nowhere else in Brazil. Pico da Neblina isn't just hard to reach. It's almost completely hidden, not by distance, but by dense forest, cloud cover, and strict limits on who's allowed to enter. From the mist-covered peaks of the Amazon, we head east across the Indian Ocean, to a mountain most people have never heard of, on an island that almost no one is allowed to visit. Just a single volcanic cone rising straight out of the sea, in one of the most tightly controlled parts of India's maritime territory. This is mountain number 5. Narcondam Peak rises 710 meters or 2,329 feet from the center of a tiny volcanic island in the Andaman Sea. It's part of India, but it's so remote, most maps don't even show its contours. The island is just 4 miles across, and it sits more than 80 miles from the nearest coast. What makes it even stranger is how little access anyone has to it. Narcondam is a declared wildlife sanctuary, and there's no civilian population, just a single outpost of Indian Coast Guard officers and a thick jungle that covers the mountain from beach to summit. You can't just show up here. Even Indian scientists have to apply for special permits, often waiting years. Between 1905 and 2002, there were fewer than 10 documented landings, and almost all of them were bird surveys. That's because Narcondam is home to something found nowhere else on Earth, the Narcondam hornbill. It's a large forest-dwelling bird with a bright yellow bill and a loud call. And there are only about 300 left, all living on this single island. If the ecosystem here disappears, so does the species. But the forest is still largely unexplored, and so is the mountain. There are no marked trails, no summit photos, no documented climbs. Even in satellite imagery, the canopy hides almost everything. It's one of the only mountains in India that remains almost completely undocumented, not because of its height, but because almost no one is allowed to step foot on it. From the humid islands of the Indian Ocean, we move to the edge of the Canadian Arctic, to a mountain barely anyone outside of polar research has even heard of. And despite being the highest mountain in the Canadian Arctic, it's rarely ever climbed. This is mountain number 6. Barbeau Peak rises 2,616 meters, or 8,582 feet, making it the highest mountain in Nunavut and the tallest in the Canadian Arctic. It's located on Ellesmere Island, just 800 kilometers from the North Pole. From space, it looks like a rippled spine of glaciers and exposed rock, wedged between two frozen fjords in Kootenay-Park National Park, a name that literally means top of the world. There are no roads, no settlements, and no access except by chartered bush plane, assuming weather even allows it. The first ascent didn't happen until 1967 by a Canadian glaciologist named Geoffrey Hattersley Smith. Since then, fewer than a dozen successful summits have ever been recorded. Most years, nobody tries. Even in summer, temperatures can drop below -20 degrees, and most of the approach involves crossing active glacier systems, with deep crevasses and no support infrastructure. There are no marked routes, no rescue options, and no fallback if conditions turn bad. One climbing team reported being stuck in a storm here for 6 straight days, with no visibility, no way out, and winds so strong they had to dig shelter into the snow just to stay upright. But what makes Barbeau Peak unique isn't just the remoteness, it's the scale of silence around it. This isn't a mountain surrounded by wilderness. It's a mountain surrounded by nothing. No towns, no villages, not even nearby mountains that people visit. For most of the year, it's completely unreachable, and even when it isn't, almost no one goes. From the frozen edge of the Arctic, we drop back down to the equator. It was untouched for decades, not because it was forbidden, but because no one could figure out how to get on top of it. The first team to reach the summit found a massive sinkhole hidden in the rock, and inside, a forest filled with species no one had ever recorded. This is mountain number 7. Mount Weiassipu is located in western Guyana, near the border with Brazil, within the Pacaraima Mountains. It rises to approximately 2,144 meters, or 7,035 feet, and takes the form of a flat-topped sandstone plateau, known as a tepui. Unlike most mountains on this list, Weiassipu was not identified through ground exploration. It entered the record in 2003 when it was noticed during aerial observation and later confirmed through satellite imagery. Prior to that, it did not appear on publicly available maps, and there is no evidence of earlier documentation by survey teams or expeditions. The mountain's summit remained completely inaccessible from the ground. Its sides consist of steep, near-vertical quartzite walls rising directly out of dense rainforest. There are no gradual slopes, no ridgelines that lead upward, and no known approach routes from surrounding valleys. The first documented human access occurred in 2012, when researchers were placed on the summit by helicopter. During that visit, scientists descended into a large sinkhole on the plateau and identified previously unknown species, including a frog found only on Weiassipu. This confirmed that the summit had remained biologically isolated for a very long period of time. The first known ascent from the base was completed in 2021, when a small climbing team established a technical route up the mountain's north face. This marked the first time Weiassipu was reached without aerial insertion. The climb required days of preparation, fixed ropes, and sustained climbing on steep rock faces in a tropical environment. Despite that ascent, Weiassipu has not entered any form of regular climbing activity. There are no repeat ascents, no standard routes, and no infrastructure supporting access. The summit remains covered in dense forest, and ground-level photographs of the plateau are extremely limited. Most knowledge about Mount Weiassipu still comes from satellite imagery, brief scientific visits, and a single documented climb. From an uncharted Tepui in South America, we head north to a mountain that's taller than Everest from base to summit, but no one's ever stood on top. It's officially off limits, protected by law, and considered sacred by the people who live in its shadow. And despite multiple attempts in the 1980s, no climber has ever reached the summit. This is mountain number 8. Gangkhar Puensum rises on the border between Bhutan and Tibet. The mountain reaches 7,570 meters, or 24,836 feet above sea level. It is the highest mountain on Earth that has never been climbed. Unlike many other forbidden peaks, this wasn't always the case. In the 1980s, several expeditions were allowed to attempt Gangkhar Puensum. Teams from Japan and Europe tried multiple routes, but all of them failed. Not because of technical difficulty alone, but because of severe weather, navigation errors, and the mountain's extreme isolation. In some cases, climbers struggled simply to locate the correct summit due to inaccurate maps. After those attempts, Bhutan made a decisive change. In 1994, the Bhutanese government banned climbing above 6,000 meters out of respect for local spiritual beliefs. In 2003, that policy was expanded into a complete ban on all mountaineering in the country. Since then, no one has been legally allowed to attempt Gangkhar Puensum. The mountain is considered sacred in Bhutanese culture. It is believed to be the home of protective deities, and disturbing the summit is viewed as spiritually harmful. Unlike Kailash, where pilgrimage is central, Gangkhar Puensum is largely left alone, remote, rarely visited, and intentionally untouched. What makes this mountain unusual is not just that it remains unclimbed, but that it is unclimbed by design. From the forbidden peaks of the Himalayas, we head thousands of kilometers south to a mountain surrounded by nothing but ocean, ice, and storms. It's part of Australian territory, but it's closer to Antarctica than to any city. And even though it's an active volcano, only one team has ever made it to the top. This is mountain number 9. Mawson Peak rises 2,745 meters, or 9,006 feet, from the center of Heard Island, one of the most remote landmasses on the planet. The island is part of Australian territory, but it's over 2,500 miles from Perth and about 1,000 miles from the nearest permanently inhabited location. It's surrounded by violent seas, 100 knot winds, and glaciers that flow directly into the ocean. Mawson Peak is the summit of Big Ben, a massive stratovolcano that's still active. In fact, satellite data shows signs of eruption almost every year. In 2021, thermal imagery even picked up a lava lake near the summit, one of only a few known on Earth. The terrain is brutal. The island has no harbors, and the shoreline is mostly cliffs and glacier walls. The only way to land is by small boat or helicopter, and conditions make both options nearly impossible most of the year. The first and only successful ascent happened in 1965, led by Australian explorer Warwick Deacock. His team reached the summit after battling storms, crevasses, and total isolation. No one has repeated it since. There are more dangerous mountains, and there are taller ones, but very few sit this far from civilization on an island shaped by ice and fire, where even landing is an expedition. From a volcanic island on the edge of Antarctica, we end in the high Himalayas, at a mountain once open to climbers, but now completely sealed off. It's the center of a sacred biosphere, protected by law, watched by the military. And somewhere on its upper slopes may still lie the remains of a Cold War nuclear experiment. This is mountain number 10. Nanda Devi rises 7,817 meters, or 25,646 feet high, making it the second highest mountain in India and the tallest entirely within the country's borders. For years, it was considered one of the most spectacular climbs in the Himalayas, but today, it's completely off limits, guarded by law, surrounded by military zones, and spiritually protected by the people who live below it. In 1983, the Indian government sealed off the entire Nanda Devi sanctuary, a 630 square kilometer glacial basin encircled by high ridges. No climbers, no trekkers, no permits, and the reason goes beyond environmental protection. In 1965, during the Cold War, a joint CIA-Indian expedition attempted to place a nuclear-powered surveillance device high on the mountain to monitor Chinese missile tests. But before they could secure it to the rock, a storm rolled in. The team had to abandon the device and evacuate. When they returned the following year, it was gone. Some believe it slipped into a crevasse and is still buried deep in the mountain's ice, where it could remain radioactive for decades. Others say it may have already melted into the Rishi-Ganga river system, which flows through villages downstream. To this day, the device has never been recovered, and no one has been allowed near the summit since. But Nanda Devi was off limits long before politics. For centuries, the peak has been worshipped as the home of the goddess Nanda, and climbing it is considered a violation of the sacred. A mountain this massive, this famous, and this close to human settlement, yet still completely untouched for decades. After all of this, one question remains. Which one of these mountains do you think is the hardest to reach? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and check out my other stuff. Thanks for watching.